Two 23-year-olds get the same job offer on the same Tuesday. $60,000, same city, same title. One of them takes it that afternoon. The other one turns it down because she's holding out for something better. And she can hold out because if the better thing doesn't come, nothing bad happens to her. Same resume, same offer, completely different set of available choices, and the difference has nothing to do with either of them. That's what this ladder is actually measuring. Not what a family gives a kid, what a family removes. Because at every level of rich kid, the thing being transferred is not money. It's the disappearance of consequences, and each rung deletes a bigger one. There are 8 of them, and the first is so ordinary that the people standing on it will tell you with total sincerity that they had no help at all. Level 1 is the kid nobody has to support and who doesn't have to support anybody. That's it. That's the whole rung. No money changes hands in either direction. Your parents are fine, so nothing you earn has to go backward, and that single fact separates you from an enormous number of your peers. Millions of American adults send money to a parent or a sibling every month, and it comes out of the same paycheck their coworkers are using to fund a retirement account. At level 1, you are not rich. You've simply been handed a starting line instead of a hole, and because a hole is invisible when you're not standing in one, you will spend your whole life assuming everyone started where you did. Level 2 is the kid who graduates owing nothing. Tuition was handled by savings, by a 529 plan the grandparents opened when the kid was 4, by a check written every August without a conversation. The typical American student who borrows leaves school owing something in the neighborhood of $30,000, and the practical effect of that isn't the payment, it's the pace. It's taking the safer job over the interesting one. So the debt-free graduate isn't just a few $100s a month ahead. They get to choose from a different menu entirely at the exact age when choices compound hardest, and they will describe the outcome of that as ambition. Level 3 is the safety net, and this is the first rung where the family's money starts silently participating in the kid's career. Nothing is transferred on a schedule. There's just a sentence that exists in the background. Call us if it gets bad. That sentence pays for the unpaid internship at the company that only hires from unpaid internships. It pays for the 3 months in an expensive city while a first business gets off the ground. It pays for the rent when a client doesn't. Surveys of American parents consistently find majorities providing some financial support to adult children. And the money is real, but the net is worth more than the money. Because risk is the price of every high-return thing in a career, and the net is what makes risk survivable. Level 3 is where 2 identical people begin to look like one is braver than the other. Level 4 is the down payment, and it's the largest single transfer most families ever make while alive. Something close to a quarter of first-time buyers report using a gift or loan from family for the down payment, and in expensive metros that share runs higher. Watch what that one check does. It converts a person from a renter into an owner at, say, 27 instead of 40, which means 13 extra years of a fixed housing payment while everyone else's rent climbs. 13 extra years of whatever the house does in value. The federal gift tax annual exclusion lets a person hand another person around $19,000 a year with no tax filing at all. And 2 parents can each do it to a child and a spouse, which quietly means a couple can move something like $76,000 into a young household in a single year without any of it appearing anywhere. The kid did not get a down payment. The kid got a 13-year head start on the largest asset they will ever own. Level 5 is the kid who becomes an owner of things before they've earned anything. A custodial account opened at birth. A UTMA that hands over control at 18 or 21, depending on the state. A 529 that grows tax-free for education and, under newer rules, can roll a leftover balance into a Roth IRA for the beneficiary within limits, meaning college money that wasn't spent becomes retirement money at 22. Now the kid isn't just unburdened, they're invested, decades before their first real paycheck. And here's the part that matters more than the balance. They grow up watching a number go up and down for reasons unrelated to work. They learn, without a single lesson, that money is something that grows on its own if you leave it alone. Most people learn that at 45, from a book. Level 6 is the trust fund, and it works nothing like the movies suggest. There's no vault. There's a document, an irrevocable trust, and a trustee, often a bank, sometimes an uncle, who controls distributions according to a standard written into the paperwork. Frequently the phrase health, education, maintenance, and support. That language decides what the kid gets, and the trustee interprets it, which produces the strangest feature of this level. The money is genuinely not yours, and you genuinely cannot lose it. It's protected from your creditors, from a divorce in many structures, and from your own worst year. You have income without employment and an asset you can't sell, and a great many people at this rung describe their adult lives as being on an allowance from a lawyer they've met twice. The other thing level 6 buys is that work becomes optional in a way that changes what work is for. When the rent is handled regardless, a job is no longer income. It's identity, or structure, or something to say at dinner. That's why this rung produces so many people in low-paying prestige fields: the gallery, the magazine, the nonprofit, the political campaign. Those industries are not accidentally full of people with family money. They're staffed by the only people who can afford entry-level salaries in expensive cities, which is also how the taste and the coverage and the policy of a country ends up being made largely by people who never had to weigh a paycheck against a decision. There's a cost at this rung that the rungs below it never pay, and it's worth naming honestly rather than pretending the top of a ladder is uncomplicated. When money arrives without being earned, every achievement afterward carries an asterisk that the person can never remove, including in their own head. You cannot prove the gallery would have hired you. You cannot prove the business would have survived without the bridge loan from your mother. Kids at level 6 often become either relentlessly credentialed, stacking degrees and certifications, buying proof, or they stop competing entirely because a game you can't lose isn't a game you can win either. It is a real problem. It is also a problem the other 7 levels would trade for instantly, and everyone involved knows that, which is why it's rarely said out loud. The other quiet feature of a trust is that it's a control device pointed at the future. The person who wrote the document is usually dead, and their preferences are still operating. Money released at 35 and not before. More for a business than for a sabbatical. Nothing at all if there's a divorce or an addiction or a marriage the drafter wouldn't have approved of. Families use these terms to encourage the behavior they consider serious, so the beneficiary spends decades arranging their life around the opinions of a grandparent they may barely remember. And the money that removed every consequence turns out to have installed one very specific consequence in their place. Level 7 is where the family stops managing money and starts operating an institution. Somewhere past roughly $100 million, a single family office becomes worth its overhead, a private staff of investment people, tax counsel, and an accountant, employed by one family whose entire job is the family's balance sheet. At this level, the planning stops being about the kid and starts being about the century. Generation-skipping transfer exemptions get used to push assets past children directly to grandchildren, avoiding a layer of estate tax. Trusts get cited in states like South Dakota, Nevada, or Delaware, which abolished or defanged the old rule limiting how long a trust could last, so the trust doesn't end. It can run for centuries, holding assets that no individual member of the family owns outright, and none of them can sell. Sit with what that structure does. The wealth stops being inheritable in the ordinary sense, because it never has to pass through anybody's death, and it never has to be split among heirs. It's a permanent entity that produces beneficiaries. A kid at level 7 isn't going to receive a fortune. The kid is going to be added to a document, and the family's real job, generation after generation, becomes governance, deciding who gets distributions, who sits on the board, who is trusted with the story. That is the point at which a rich family starts to resemble a small government with a legal department. And level 8 isn't money at all, it's the last name. At the top of this ladder, the asset is that a phone gets answered, that a summer job exists because your father plays tennis with the person who owns the firm, that the meeting happens because of who made the introduction, that an admissions office has a category for people related to previous graduates, and that legacy applicants have historically been admitted at meaningfully higher rates at selective schools than everyone else. None of that shows up on a balance sheet. All of it converts directly into income. The 8th level is being pre-vouched for by the world, and it's the only rung that cannot be bought, only inherited, which is exactly why families at level 7 spend so much effort acquiring it. What makes level 8 so durable is that it survives losing the money. Families go broke constantly. Bad decade, bad divorce, bad business, and the network outlasts the balance sheet by a generation or more because a name still opens a door long after the accounts behind it have emptied. That's the asset the family office at level 7 is quietly trying to manufacture. Charitable boards, a building with the surname on it, the right schools, the right marriages. They're converting money into recognition because recognition is the only form of wealth that doesn't have to be managed, taxed, or divided among heirs. And notice how the latter is described from the inside, because this is the part that makes the whole thing so hard to discuss. Almost nobody on it says the word rich. Level 1 says they're normal. Level 2 says their parents made sacrifices, which is often completely true. Level 4 says they bought the house themselves, and in their memory they did. They signed the papers, they make the payment. The gift was one conversation 8 years ago that has since compressed into a footnote. Level 6 says the trust is complicated and they don't really control it. Also true. Every rung has an accurate sentence available that makes it sound like the rung below. That's not usually dishonesty. It's that people calibrate against whoever is one step up, never one step down. The kid with the down payment is standing next to the kid with the trust fund, feeling ordinary. The kid with the trust fund is standing next to the family office kid, feeling middle class. There's a version of this conversation happening at every level simultaneously, all of it sincere, and the cumulative effect is that a form of advantage that determines most of the outcomes in a person's life becomes almost impossible to name in public without someone getting offended. Now go back to the two 23-year-olds. Look at what actually separated them, because it wasn't a check. One of them could turn down a job, that's all. She could hold out, take the risky role, negotiate hard, quit a bad manager, move for an opportunity, start something that might fail. And every one of those decisions has a higher expected payoff than the safe version, which is precisely why they're only available to people who can eat a bad outcome. The other one had to say yes on Tuesday. 10 years later, the gap between them will look like the difference between a bold person and a cautious one, and everyone involved, including both of them, will describe it in those terms. That's the machinery this whole ladder is hiding. Family money doesn't mostly arrive as money. It arrives as the ability to be patient, to wait for the right offer, to hold an asset through a bad year, to leave a job with nothing lined up, to say no. Patience is the highest returning behavior in finance, and it's not a personality trait. It's a purchase, and somebody in the family bought it, often a generation or two before the person spending it was born. So the honest question isn't whether your family had money. It's simpler and more uncomfortable than that. What's the worst thing that could happen to you financially this year, and who absorbs it? If the answer is a person, you're somewhere on this ladder, whether or not you ever received a dollar. If the answer is nobody, then every risk you've ever declined was priced correctly, and you should stop reading advice written by people who were never charged the same price. If this changed how you think about money, hit like and subscribe for more.